So one piece that I know we have alluded to a lot and I think is really powerful is calculating a custom donation ask depending on someone's giving history in the past. So you can use different elements or calculations to determine what that ask amount should be. So one thing that Brian just walked you through is the process of cycling through someone's donations to add up the total amount and then divide that by the number of donations to grab the average amount that someone typically gives, which we could then use to say, maybe that's the ask amount that we want to put in front of people. Maybe we want to take their average ask and add 50% onto it and try to bump up their average donation ask. But as I think even Ollie has gone through this process with a customer recently and noticed that if you start pulling averages together, then you might end up with the weird example that we had of you're asking someone for $87 and you're like, well, that's wonderful, but I should have just asked them for 100 or any flat number other than kind of these wonky dynamic things. So one safer bet and one that I think is a little bit easier to digest too, in terms of kind of a low hanging fruit that you can try this giving season without having to dig way into liquid if some of this seems a little overwhelming, is by using someone's last donation amount and trying to bump that up for the next donation ask. So on the right side, I just have a basic, you'll notice I keep referencing Craft Club. This is my demo nation. And if you want to take a fake course on learning how to knit that I put together and answer survey questions based off of it, then I've recreated an LMS experience in NationBuilder doing that. But this is my demo nation. So I'm just saying thank you for your support of our organization with donations like yours, all that good stuff. Tell them where it's going, why it's important. Your last donation was, and then I'm using the smart field of last donation amount to pull that amount in. So your last donation amount was $10, which we used to develop our new course. Now we're excited to start working on our next course. And then I have a little liquid snippet here. So very similar to what Brian was, actually exact same thing as what Brian had just referenced. We don't have a smart field or even a variable on someone's profile that we can pull from that says, hey, what was someone's last donation amount at plus 50% or increased by 50%. So we have to create one. So we are using assign custom donation ask, which is creating a variable called custom donation ask. And it's kind of just like a container that we can then run a calculation and store the value of that calculation in so we can reference it later. So we're saying assign custom donation ask equals, and then pulling in their last donation amount, multiplying it. Normally you'd multiply it by 1.5, but of course, as Brian mentioned, the total donation amounts that we store, thanks to some wonky NationBuilder stuff, are all in cents. So you have to divide everything by 100 to have it show in dollars. So we're multiplying it by 0.015, which will give us the 150% of the last donation amount in dollars. And then we're just rounding it. So if there were any cents, we're cutting them off. And then now that we've done that calculation, we can now reference it in the body of the email. So will you contribute, and then pulling in custom donation ask, which will in turn display the increased custom amount that we've just calculated. And I'm also pulling it into the text in the button. So you can see it's saying, will you contribute $15? That $15 isn't stored anywhere in my profile. That's literally just coming from the math that we did on this $10 donation right here. It's also showing in the value of the button. And so what I'm going to do before we, wrap up these slides is I'm actually going to jump into the page. Bear with me while I maneuver the Zoom window around. So you can see this is exactly what we just looked at, but I just want to show you what this looks like in the button here. So in the button text, I'm just pulling in, let me zoom in a couple times. I'm just pulling in double brackets that custom donation ask variable that we created, storing our 150% of the last donation amount. And then at the very end of the URL that our button is linked to, I have that little snippet that we talked about before. So I have my donation link, and then I have the question mark, amount equals, and then between the double brackets, I have custom donation ask. So in the prior slide that I referenced this in, I had the number 10 here, which would carry through as $10 to the donation page. Instead, this is actually going to be totally dependent on whatever the calculation is for that recipient of the email. So if, you know, Ollie's last donation was $5, this would be $7.50. Well, I guess we're rounding it, so it would be $8. So this would be totally custom depending on who's getting the email. So if I click on this link, it's going to bring me to the donation page. And you can see $15 is highlighted right here. So that is kind of what the experience looks like. And you could do that with any of the calculations that you might do if you were to take the more advanced approach that Brian had just walked through too. So if you did want to try this with like someone's average donation amount, see what kind of weird donations come in the door, but might be worth it if you think that that reflects a more aspirational donation ask. Now's the time. So yeah, you can do the same thing, but the carrying through to the donation page is definitely a cool trick if you haven't done it before, especially if you're making a recommendation for a donation amount.